Allah, oh Allah, Jal Shan Allah, Allah,
In the Islamic tradition, God is also known, besides many other names, by the name of Malik-ul-Mulk, the ruler, the possessor of all the domains, whether it be earth or heavens. Similarly, the Quran is a book that emphasizes justice, social justice, political justice, economic justice. And the example of the Prophet, which is misaaq-e-Madina, the covenant of Medina, is something that distills the spirit of the Quran into concrete reality of human affairs. The Quran is a book of justice. It's Kitabul Insaf. It is not necessarily a book of equality or Kitabul Masawat, although throughout Islamic history, the Muslims have had an equality in the eyes of God, in front of the Sharia, in the eyes of the Qadis. But there have been various social classes. It has never been a crime to be rich or to be poor, and hence, in an Islamic society, it is important to keep in mind the ultimate criterion for realizing what is a good society is justice. The example of the Prophet in the covenant of Medina, it is important to realize what is it that the covenant of Medina achieved. It achieved consolidation of various tribes into an ummah. It also achieved protection of Muslims from the persecutors of Islam, and it also gave a safe haven to all of the religious minorities under the abode of Islam, with Prophet as a statesman and also as a pontiff of God. The spiritual principles cannot be divorced from political realities in an ideal Muslim state and in an ideal Muslim society. A society of pious and knowledgeable people is the society which is the Islamic ideal. A society in which the life, liberty and honor is protected of all individuals by other individuals. In the Islamic tradition, identity of citizens, of adherents of certain religions, of people within a society and a state is based on not the distinctions between race, language and ethnicity. Rather, they're based on what one believes in. Islam has always approached, historically Muslims have also always approached the other communities, whether minorities or majorities, as religious communities. It is not important where one is born or the color of one's skin. What is important is what is it that one believes in. On the basis of those beliefs and values, which are often shared beliefs and values, Muslims have successfully been able to relate with several non-Muslim communities without annihilating them. If one compares this example of Muslims in history with Christianization in Europe, one can ask the question as to what happened to all of the pre-Christian minorities, such as the Vikings and the Druids and the ancient German religions, upon the advent of Christianization of Europe. They all disappeared. Whereas most of the pre-Muslim communities, pre-Islamic communities living within the Dar al-Islam, within the abode of Islam, are still around today. And this is largely attributable to the notions that exist inside of the Quran, the example of the Prophet, and all of the fetters that the Islamic Sharia has imposed upon what the rulers can do and they cannot do. The purpose of Islamic governance is to establish justice on earth, is to have justice within society, within the state, and across from the state on a regional and global level. The Quran says that God is al-Malik-ul-Mulk. He's the possessor of all domains. All power and authority and sovereignty ultimately belongs to God. Then we have the example of the Prophet in Covenant of Medina that has to a large extent realized the Quranic ideals in the society of Arabia. The Covenant of Medina established few things. First of all, it consolidated all of the loosened, warring tribes of Arabia, especially beginning with Medina. Then it also helped put together all of the religious communities, the coexistence of majority and minority, the nascent Muslim community, as well as other people of the book and the Sabians and the Bedouins and so forth. The Covenant of Medina also establishes the fact that the spiritual principles cannot be divorced from political realities. The Prophet as a statesman and the Prophet as a supreme pontiff of God were at once lived realities for Muslims. This also brings us to a point where the ultimate referent of Muslim community, the Ummah, has to be discussed. The Ummah has been referred, the concept of Ummah has been referred by the Quran about 63 times. God has said that we have created you into Ummah and different umum. And the Prophet's misaaq-e-Madina, the Covenant of Medina, was a first step in consolidation of such Ummah. The second step is that of the Millah. Is also defined in English language as a community. The Millah can be within an Islamic state, within the society, and across the frontiers of state and society as well. To safeguard the concepts of Ummah and Millah is the institution of Caliphate, of Khilafah. The Khilafah is of two types. It has historically been realized by the Sunnis. It also has been realized by the Shias. But before the Shia and Sunni cleavage began, the Khulafai Rashidun, the four rightly guided caliphs, also are examples for Muslims as that type of rule which after the Covenant of Medina was still the most enlightened rule. Since then, Muslim political philosophers, theologians, and so forth have stipulated several requirements for the office of the caliphate. They are unified in arguing that God has called man as Khalifatullah, which is man's vicegerent on earth, God's vicegerent on earth. But at the same time, the Muslim tradition also emphasizes the caliph, the ruler of such men, as the Khalifatul Rasulullah, somebody who holds the Islamic tradition from the prophetic times and is the legitimate holder of such office, which requires all of these attributes that the Prophet himself had. The caliph in the Sunni tradition, just like the Prophet himself, must have within him those qualities, the qualities of sound mind and body, sound judgment, piety and knowledge, and also a grip on Islamic sciences, especially when he is going to be the custodian of the Sharia. The Shia tradition has a small variety, has a small variation from the orthodox Sunni position, in which the Shia authorities have emphasized that the Imam must be one of the descendants of the Prophet, and the Imam must be is considered by most of the Shias as masoom, as inerrant, and he cannot be elected but only selected. The Sunni authorities, on the other hand, allow for a mutual consultation and election of Imam, although not all of the theologians have agreed on the election of the Imam. Nonetheless, this election is not an election that takes place in accordance with today's democratic principles, but by a smaller electoral college, that is a group of people who are at the higher level of knowledge and piety. These are the people who can actually vote a caliph in the office.
Allah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah.